The Galactic Council had seen many species join their ranks over the centuries. Each brought their own strengths, technologies, and perspectives to the vast network of civilizations that spanned across known space. They contributed their mastery of energy manipulation. The Crystalline Collective offered their perfect memory storage systems. The Empire provided military strategy and discipline that was unmatched across 12 sectors. But humans were different, terrifyingly different. Commander of the Third Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominance, watching the addition to their joint military operation through the massive viewport. The human vessel Persistence hung in space beside them, looking remarkably primitive compared to the sleek, bioengineered curves of warships or the crystal formations that housed collective fleets. "Still can't believe the Council approved their membership," muttered Subcommander, his four arms crossed in what humans might recognize as skepticism. "Look at that ship, metal plates welded together like some ancient relic." His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. They had been the undisputed military power of the Council for over 200 cycles. Their warriors were bred for combat from birth, genetically enhanced for strength, speed, and tactical awareness. Each soldier could bench press half a ton and react to threats in microseconds. They had conquered 17 different hostile species and brought peace to the Outer Rim territories. Yet something about these humans unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. The communication panel chirped. "Commander, incoming transmission from the human vessel." "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of Captain Sarah, the human military liaison assigned to their mission. She looked impossibly young by standards, barely past her species' adolescence, with short dark hair and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Commander," she said with that strange human expression they called a smile, "our scouts have located the Ravager hive ship. It's holding position in the asteroid field just like our intelligence suggested." The Ravagers were the reason for this joint operation, a species of creatures that consumed organic matter and technology with equal enthusiasm. They had been terrorizing the outer colonies for months, and 3 separate council fleets had failed to stop them. The creatures were relentless, numerous, and seemed to feel no fear or pain. "Excellent," replied. "My warriors are ready to begin the assault. The Ravager's hive ship is massive, but our plasma cannons should be able to breach their hull defenses within the first hour of engagement." Captain's expression shifted slightly. "Actually, Commander, we'd like to request permission to handle this differently." "Differently how?" "We'd like to send in a hunting party first." The bridge fell silent. Tactical officers exchanged glances. Subcommander's translator implant must have malfunctioned because surely he hadn't heard correctly. "I'm sorry, Captain, but did you say a hunting party?" "That's correct. A small team to infiltrate the hive ship and eliminate key targets before the main assault begins." His mandibles spread wide in what humans might mistake for a grin, but was actually a sign of confusion. "Captain, perhaps you don't understand the nature of what we're facing. This isn't a small raiding party or a lightly defended outpost. This is a Ravager hive ship containing potentially millions of combat-ready organisms. Each individual Ravager is 2 meters tall, armed with natural weapons that can cut through battle armor and completely fearless in combat." "We understand perfectly, Commander." "Then you understand why sending a small team into that ship would be suicide. Even my finest warriors wouldn't attempt such a mission without overwhelming support." Captain leaned forward slightly. "Commander, with respect, your warriors have never hunted the way humans hunt." Before could respond, another voice came through the communication channel. Deeper, rougher, with an accent the translator seemed to struggle with. "This is Master Sergeant Jake. I'll be leading the hunting party." A second human appeared on the display, and his confidence in human judgment dropped another level. Where Captain looked young, this human looked ancient by their species' standards. His hair was gray, his face marked with lines and scars. Most disturbing of all, he had the eyes of something that had seen too much death. "Sergeant," said carefully, "I appreciate your courage, but I cannot in good conscience allow you to throw your lives away on an impossible mission." "Not impossible," said quietly, "just different from what you're used to." "How is it different?" Was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something that made the warriors on the bridge unconsciously step back from their stations. Your species fights wars, Commander, noble battles with clear objectives, honorable tactics, and rules of engagement. You fight to win territory, to defend your people, to prove your strength. He paused, and those ancient eyes seemed to look directly through the display at each individual. But before we learned to fight wars, humans had to learn something else first, something older and much more dangerous. Which is how to hunt things that are bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than we are, how to track something for days through hostile terrain, how to kill something that could tear us apart with its bare hands. His face didn't change expression, but somehow his presence seemed to fill the bridge of the flagship. We had to learn how to be predators, Commander, and humans have been very, very good at it for a very long time. Sub-Commander stepped forward. This is ridiculous. Master Sergeant, you're talking about primitive hunting tactics against some of the most dangerous combat organisms in known space. These aren't wild animals you can trap or ambush. These are intelligent, organized, and bred for war. His attention shifted to the Sub-Commander and immediately regretted speaking. Tell me, Sub-Commander, what's the most dangerous predator on you? The shadow stalkers of the northern wastes. 3-meter-tall apex predators with natural camouflage and razor-sharp claws. They've killed hundreds of our people over the centuries. And how do your people deal with them? We avoid their territory. When necessary, we hunt them in large groups with heavy weapons and energy shields. Successful strategy. Usually, sometimes we lose a few warriors, but we can drive them back or eliminate particularly dangerous individuals. Nodded thoughtfully. On Earth, our most dangerous predator was something called a cave bear. 3 meters tall, half a ton of muscle, claws like knives, and strong enough to crush a human with one swipe. The warriors listened despite themselves. This was the kind of tactical discussion they understood. How did your primitive ancestors deal with these creatures? Asked. We didn't drive them back, said quietly. We hunted them to extinction. The bridge fell silent again. Impossible, said finally. Your species lacks natural weapons, enhanced genetics, or advanced technology. How could you possibly hunt something that powerful? His expression might have been a smile, but it held no warmth. Because we learned to think like them, to understand how they moved, where they nested, what they feared. We learned to track them across continents and wait for days without moving. We learned to make weapons that could kill from a distance and set traps that could bring down creatures 10 times our size. He paused, letting that sink in. But most importantly, we learned that when you're hunting something dangerous, you don't fight fair. You don't give it a chance to fight back. You study it until you know everything about it, and then you kill it before it even knows you're there. Captain took over the conversation. The Ravagers are formidable in direct combat, but they're still biological creatures with predictable behavior patterns. They still need to eat, sleep, and maintain their technology, and they still have vulnerabilities. What kind of vulnerabilities? Asked, his tactical mind engaging despite his reservations. Their hive ship is organized around a central queen chamber. Take out the queen, and the entire hive goes into chaos. But the queen is protected by hundreds of thousands of drones, and she's located in the most heavily defended part of the ship. Which is why a direct assault would be necessary, pointed out. You'd need overwhelming force to fight through that many defenders. Or, said, you need to understand the ship well enough to get to the queen without fighting most of them. He gestured off-screen, and the display changed to show detailed schematics of the Ravager hive ship. The level of detail was astounding. Structural weak points, air circulation systems, power distribution networks, even what appeared to be behavioral pattern analyses of the creatures themselves. How did you obtain this intelligence? Asked, genuinely impressed. We've been watching them for 3 weeks. Captain explained. Passive sensors, long-range observation, behavioral analysis. We know their patrol routes, their feeding schedules, and their communication patterns. We know which sections of the ship are heavily guarded and which ones they consider secure enough to leave lightly defended, added. We know where they store their organic matter, where they maintain their technology, and most importantly, we know how they react when something goes wrong. The tactical display zoomed in on a specific section of the hive ship. There's a maintenance tunnel system they use for moving biological waste. It connects directly to the Queen's chamber, but it's too small and unimportant for heavy guards. A small team could infiltrate through the outer waste disposal ports, navigate through the tunnel system, and reach the Queen chamber without alerting the main population. studied the schematics. The plan was risky, requiring precise timing and intimate knowledge of the ship's internal structure. But it was also brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of fighting through the Ravager's strengths, it exploited their weaknesses. "How many humans would you need for this mission?" he asked. "5," replied without hesitation. "Small enough to move quietly, large enough to handle unexpected problems." "5 humans against millions of Ravagers," said incredulously. "This is madness." Looked directly at the sub-commander. "Tell me something. In all your military training, did anyone ever teach you how to move through enemy territory without being detected?" "Of course, stealth tactics are a fundamental part of military doctrine." "And how long can your warriors remain undetected in hostile territory?" "Several hours if conditions are favorable." "My team can remain undetected for days if necessary. We can move through enemy territory without leaving tracks, without making sounds, and without triggering their natural sensing abilities. We've done it before." "Against what kind of enemies?" Was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old memories. "Things that could smell us from kilometers away, things that could hear a heartbeat through solid rock, things that had been hunting other predators for millions of years before humans ever picked up a tool." Captain leaned forward. "Commander, we're not asking you to change your tactical plan. When we eliminate the Queen, your forces can proceed with the main assault as planned. The difference is that instead of fighting through organized resistance, you'll be facing confused, leaderless drones." Considered this. The human plan was unconventional, but the strategic advantage was undeniable. If they could successfully eliminate the Ravager Queen, the subsequent battle would be far less costly for all Council forces involved. "What do you need from us?" he asked finally. "Just transportation to the insertion point and extraction support when the mission is complete," replied. "And one more thing." "What's that?" "When we eliminate the Queen, the Hive ship is going to go completely insane for about 10 minutes. Every Ravager on board will be in a mindless rage, attacking anything that moves. Your forces need to stay well clear until that initial reaction burns itself out." "How can you be certain of this behavioral pattern?" His expression grew distant. "Because we've seen it before. Take out the leader of a pack animal and the pack always reacts the same way. First comes confusion, then rage, then chaos. After that burns out, they either scatter or submit. It's been the same pattern for every pack species we've ever hunted." Sub-Commander shook his head. "You're talking about animals, Sergeant. The Ravagers are intelligent creatures with advanced technology." "Intelligence doesn't matter when you're dealing with biological imperatives that are millions of years old," replied. "Pack behavior is pack behavior, whether you're talking about wolves or Ravagers. The Queen is their alpha, their leader, their mother. Kill her, and they revert to basic instincts." Captain stood up. "We'll begin insertion in 6 hours. That should give us enough time to reach the Queen chamber and complete our mission before your main assault begins." The communication ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Finally, Sub-Commander spoke up. "Commander, I have to advise against this course of action. These humans are either incredibly brave or completely insane. Either way, we're about to watch 5 of them die horribly." Continued staring at the human ship through the viewport. Something about this entire conversation had fundamentally changed his understanding of what humanity represented. Not their technology, which was indeed primitive. Not their physical capabilities, which were unremarkable. But their approach to conflict was unlike anything he had encountered in 2 centuries of military service. "Perhaps," he said finally, "but I have a feeling we're about to learn something very important about our new allies." 6 hours later, the command crew watched their sensors as a small human shuttle detached from the Persistence and headed toward the asteroid field where the Ravager Hive ship lay waiting. The shuttle was barely larger than a fighter craft, carrying just 5 humans into what any rational military analysis would consider certain death. "Shuttle is approaching the Hive ship's outer perimeter," reported the sensor operator. "No response from Ravager patrol craft. The humans appear to be using some kind of stealth technology. Or the Ravagers simply don't consider such a small craft worth investigating," muttered. Watched the tiny blip on his tactical display as it maneuvered through the asteroid field with surprising precision. The human pilot seemed to understand exactly how to use the floating rocks as cover, timing each movement to coincide with the Ravager's patrol patterns. "They're good," he admitted grudgingly. "Better than I expected." The shuttle disappeared from sensors as it slipped into the shadow of the massive hive ship. For the next several hours, there would be no way to monitor the human team's progress. They would either succeed in their impossible mission or die trying, and they wouldn't know which until it was over. "All ships maintain position and prepare for assault operations," ordered. "If the humans succeed, we move in immediately to capitalize on the chaos. If they fail—" He paused, considering the implications. "If they fail, we proceed with standard bombardment protocols and hope their sacrifice wasn't completely meaningless." Deep within the bowels of the Ravager hive ship, 5 humans in adaptive camouflage gear moved through waste disposal tunnels that reeked of organic decay and alien biochemistry. Master Sergeant led the way, followed by Corporal Sarah, the team's demolitions expert. Behind her came Private First Class, their tech specialist, then Sergeant Lisa Park, their medic, and finally Private Tommy, the captain's younger brother and their designated marksman. The tunnels were exactly as their intelligence had indicated, too small for Ravager patrols, but large enough for humans to move through in single file. The organic walls pulsed with a rhythm that suggested they were inside some kind of living system, and the constant flow of biological waste created enough background noise to mask their movement. Held up his hand, and the team froze. Through the thin wall separating them from one of the main corridors, they could hear the clicking and chittering of Ravager communication. He activated his helmet's passive sensors and waited for the sounds to fade before signaling the team to continue. They had been moving for 3 hours, following a route that took them through the least defended sections of the ship while gradually working their way toward the central Queen Chamber. So far, everything was proceeding exactly as planned. But had been hunting dangerous things for 30 years, and he knew that when something seemed too easy, it usually was. The first indication that something was wrong came from Private Scanner. He tapped shoulder and held up his tablet, showing massive biosignature readings just ahead of their current position. Studied the display and felt his blood run cold. According to the scanner, there were over 200 Ravagers gathered in the chamber directly above them. That wasn't supposed to happen. Their intelligence indicated this area should have been nearly empty at this time of day. He activated his communication implant and whispered into his throat mic. "Overwatch, this is Hunter 1. We're seeing unexpected concentration of hostiles in Sector 7. Request updated intelligence." Captain's voice crackled back through their secured channel. "Hunter 1, we're showing the same readings. It appears the Ravagers have altered their patrol patterns since our last observation." Considered their options. They could backtrack and try to find another route, but that would add hours to their mission timeline and increase the risk of detection. They could wait for the concentration to disperse naturally, but there was no guarantee it would happen soon enough. Or they could proceed as planned and hope their stealth capabilities were good enough to get them past undetected. "How much explosive do we have?" he asked Corporal quietly. "Enough to take out the Queen and half her chamber," replied. "But if you're thinking about clearing that room, we don't have nearly enough for 200 Ravagers." Shook his head, not thinking about clearing it, thinking about creating a distraction. He pulled up the ship's schematics on his tablet and studied the surrounding area. 2 levels down from their current position was what appeared to be a food storage area. If they could create an explosion there, it might draw some of the Ravagers away from their current blocking position. "Can you access the ship's internal systems from here?" The tech specialist nodded and pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a laptop and a surgical instrument. "Give me 5 minutes." While worked on hacking into the ship's systems, activated his long-range communication system. "Overwatch, we're going to need to modify the timeline. We've encountered an unexpected obstacle and need to implement alternative tactics." "Understood, Hunter 1. What's your new estimated completion time?" Checked his chronometer. "Add 2 hours to our original schedule. We're going to have to take a more indirect approach." Acknowledged. Be advised that Command is getting restless. Commander is asking for regular status updates. Tell the Commander that hunting isn't like conventional warfare. Sometimes you have to wait for the right opportunity instead of forcing one. Looked up from his device. "I'm in. The ship's computer system is more advanced than we expected, but it's still based on biological neural networks. I can trigger localized system failures in specific areas. Can you make it look like an accident? Better than that, I can make it look like a cascading failure from normal wear and tear. The Ravagers won't even know it was sabotage. Smiled grimly, do it. His fingers flew over his device's interface, targeting the waste processing system 2 levels down. In about 30 seconds, they're going to have a massive organic overflow that will trigger their automatic cleanup protocols. The team waited in tense silence until they heard the unmistakable sound of biological alarms echoing through the ship's corridors. The chittering above them immediately became more agitated, and Scanner showed the concentration of Ravagers beginning to disperse as individuals peeled off to deal with the emergency. Beautiful whispered, let's move. The team continued through the waste tunnels, now following a route that would take them around the remaining Ravager positions. The organic overflow had continued to cause chaos throughout that section of the ship, drawing security forces away from their intended path. 30 minutes later, they reached the junction that connected to the Queen Chamber's waste disposal system, held up his hand again, and activated his passive sensors. The readings showed exactly what their intelligence had predicted: minimal security in this area, with most of the guards concentrated around the main entrances to the chamber. This is it, he whispered to his team. Once we enter that chamber, there's no backing out. Everyone clear on the mission parameters. 4 heads nodded in the dim light of the tunnel. You have 90 seconds to plant the charges around the Queen's life support systems. You're responsible for ensuring those systems can't be restarted. Park you and provide security. I'll handle the Queen directly. What if there are more guards than we expected? Asked. His expression was stone cold. Then we adapt and overcome. Remember, we're not here to fight a battle. We're here to eliminate a target and extract. Fast, quiet, and efficient. The entrance to the Queen Chamber's waste system was a circular opening barely large enough for a human to crawl through. Went first, his weapon ready and his sensors scanning for any sign of detection. The tunnel curved upward for about 20 meters before opening into a larger chamber. What they found there stopped them cold. The Queen Chamber was massive, easily the size of a football stadium, and the Queen herself was far larger than their intelligence had indicated. She was a grotesque fusion of insect and machine, with a body that stretched nearly 50 meters from head to tail. Biological tubes and mechanical interfaces connected her to dozens of different systems throughout the chamber. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. What terrified him was the fact that she wasn't alone. Surrounding the Queen in perfect formation were approximately 1,000 Ravager warriors. Not the regular drones they had been expecting, but elite guards that were nearly twice the size of normal Ravagers and covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating. Jesus Christ, whispered beside him. Studied the scene through his scope. The guards weren't moving in patrol patterns. They were standing in perfect ranks, completely motionless, almost as if they were. They're not awake, he realized suddenly. Peered over his shoulder. What do you mean? Look at their posture. Look at their positioning. They're in some kind of hibernation state. The Queen must keep her personal guards in stasis when they're not needed to conserve energy. How long do they stay like that? Continued observing the chamber. The Queen herself appeared to be in some kind of deep meditative state, with her massive head resting on a raised platform while various biological and mechanical systems pulsed around her. According to our behavioral analysis, Ravager Queens enter deep sleep cycles every 6 hours. During that time, their guards go into stasis to avoid disturbing them. How much time do we have before she wakes up? Checked his chronometer and calculated based on their observations of Ravager behavior patterns. Maybe 40 minutes, 50 if we're lucky. Is that enough time? It has to be. The team moved into position around the chamber's perimeter. The sleeping guards created a maze of obstacles, but they also provided cover as long as the team was careful not to disturb them. Had hunted sleeping predators before, and he knew the key was to move slowly and avoid any sudden vibrations that might trigger their defensive instincts. Began placing her charges around the biological systems that kept the Queen alive. Each explosive was barely larger than a coin, but they were designed to cause cascading failures in organic systems. Worked on the mechanical interfaces, introducing viruses that would prevent any automated revival procedures. Meanwhile, positioned himself for a clear shot at the Queen's brainstem. According to their intelligence, Ravager Queens could survive massive trauma to most parts of their body, but damage to the brainstem would cause immediate death. Everything was proceeding perfectly until Scanner detected movement from one of the guards, turned his scope toward the indicated position, and watched as one of the massive warriors began to stir. Its head lifted slightly, and its sensory organs started twitching as if it was detecting something unusual. "Abort," whispered into his throat Mike. "Everyone freeze." The team became perfectly still, using techniques that human hunters had developed over thousands of years of stalking dangerous prey. They controlled their breathing, slowed their heart rates, and became as motionless as the sleeping guards around them. The partially awakened guard's head turned slowly, scanning the chamber for whatever had disturbed its sleep. Its sensory organs were far more advanced than those of regular Ravagers, capable of detecting heartbeats, chemical signatures, and even electromagnetic emissions from electronic devices. For nearly 10 minutes, the guard remained in this semi-alert state, while the human team remained frozen in place. Could feel sweat beginning to accumulate under his camouflage gear, but he forced himself to remain perfectly still. One wrong move would wake the entire chamber, and 5 humans against 1,000 elite Ravager guards was not a battle anyone could win. Finally, apparently satisfied that there was no immediate threat, the guard settled back into its hibernation state. Waited another 5 minutes before allowing his team to resume their mission. Finished placing her charges, completed his sabotage of the mechanical systems, and lined up his shot on the Queen's brainstem. "Everyone ready," he whispered. "Charges set," confirmed. "Systems compromised," reported. "Security clear," Parkin responded simultaneously. Took a deep breath and centered his rifle's targeting system on the specific neural cluster that would ensure instant death. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, execute." The rifle's discharge was barely audible, but the effect was immediate and dramatic. The Queen's massive body convulsed once, then went completely still as her neural systems shut down. Charges detonated 3 seconds later, destroying the biological support systems and ensuring that revival would be impossible. For a moment, the chamber remained eerily quiet. Then, as had predicted, the sleeping guards began to wake up. "Move, move, move," shouted as the first guards began to stir. The team sprinted toward their exit tunnel as chaos erupted around them. The awakening guards immediately detected the Queen's death and began emitting piercing alarm calls that echoed throughout the chamber. Within seconds, the air was filled with the sound of 1,000 elite warriors going berserk. Reached the tunnel entrance first and dove through the opening just as the nearest guard fully awakened and spotted the fleeing humans. The creature's roar of rage followed them into the tunnel, along with the sound of massive claws scraping against the tunnel walls as it tried to pursue them. "The tunnel's too small for them," panted as they crawled desperately through the waste disposal system. "For now," replied grimly, "but they'll figure out how to get around us soon enough. We need to reach extraction before they organize a proper pursuit." Behind them, the sound of destruction was growing louder as more guards awakened and began tearing apart the chamber in their mindless rage. The Queen's death had triggered exactly the biological response had predicted, a period of complete insanity that would last until their primitive instincts burned themselves out. But that also meant they had only a limited time to escape before the survivors regained enough intelligence to mount an organized hunt. The team reached their shuttle insertion point just as the first Ravager pursuit teams began emerging from other parts of the ship. Activated his emergency beacon as they sprinted across the asteroid's surface toward their hidden spacecraft. "Overwatch, this is Hunter 1. Package delivered, requesting immediate extraction." "Acknowledged, Hunter 1. Extraction in progress. Be advised that the entire hive ship appears to be going insane. We're reading massive internal destruction and complete breakdown of organized activity." Allowed himself a grim smile as they reached their shuttle and began the emergency launch sequence. "That's exactly what's supposed to happen, Overwatch. Tell Commander he can begin his assault in approximately 8 minutes. By then, the initial rage response should be burning out, and his forces will be facing confused, leaderless drones instead of organized resistance. As their shuttle cleared the asteroid field and headed back toward the Council fleet, looked back at the Ravager hive ship through the rear viewport. Even from this distance, he could see secondary explosions and debris being ejected from various parts of the massive vessel as the maddened guards tore it apart from the inside. "Master Sergeant," said quietly, "they are never going to believe what we just did." Settled back in his seat and began cleaning his rifle. "Doesn't matter what they believe, son. What matters is that they're about to learn something very important about human beings." "Which is?" His face showed the hint of a smile, that when humans hunt something, it stays dead. Aboard the flagship Dominance, Commander watched his sensors in amazement as the Ravager hive ship began tearing itself apart. Internal explosions were cascading throughout the massive vessel, and the organized patrol patterns that had been maintaining defensive perimeters around the ship had completely collapsed. "Incredible," Subcommander muttered. "5 humans just accomplished what 3 Council fleets couldn't do." "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving transmission from the human shuttle. They confirm successful elimination of primary target and request that we begin assault operations immediately." Nodded slowly. The tactical advantage was obvious. Instead of facing millions of organized defenders, his forces would now be attacking confused, leaderless creatures that were already destroying their own ship from the inside. "All ships begin assault operations. Target the main reactor core and propulsion systems. Let's finish what the humans started." But as the fleet moved in for the kill, found himself thinking about the conversation he had witnessed between Master Sergeant and his own subcommander. The human had spoken about hunting species to extinction, about understanding an enemy so completely that you could kill it before it knew you were there. For the first time in his military career, Commander began to wonder if the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake by accepting humanity as an ally rather than treating them as a potential threat. Because if 5 humans could infiltrate and destroy the most dangerous predator species in known space, using nothing but primitive weapons and hunting tactics that were thousands of years old, what could millions of humans accomplish if they ever decided that the Council itself was something that needed to be hunted? The thought sent an involuntary chill through his exoskeleton, and for the first time in 2 centuries of military service, Commander found himself genuinely afraid of his allies. The aftermath of the Ravager hive ship's destruction sent shockwaves throughout the Galactic Council that had nothing to do with the explosions that finally tore the massive vessel apart. Within hours of the mission's completion, every major military commander in Council space had received detailed reports of what had happened. 5 humans had accomplished what the best warriors of 17 different species had failed to achieve. Commander stood in his private quarters aboard the Dominance, reviewing the mission data for the 100th time. The numbers were undeniable. Total human casualties, 0. Total mission time, less than 6 hours. Cost in resources, 1 small shuttle and minimal ammunition. Strategic impact, complete elimination of the Ravager threat in this sector. Compare that to the Council's previous attempts. 3 major fleet engagements, over 200 casualties, massive resource expenditure, and no significant progress toward actually stopping the Ravager expansion. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. "Come." Subcommander entered, his 4 arms carrying multiple data tablets. "Sir, I've completed the tactical analysis you requested." "And?" His mandibles clicked nervously. "The humans didn't just eliminate the Ravager threat, Commander. They demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally change our understanding of small unit tactics." Gestured for him to continue. Their infiltration methodology was unlike anything in our military doctrine. Instead of relying on advanced technology or superior firepower, they used behavioral analysis, environmental adaptation, and what can only be described as predatory instincts. "Elaborate." Activated one of his tablets, displaying a timeline of the human mission. They spent 3 weeks observing the Ravager hive ship before taking any action. Not gathering intelligence about defenses or weapon capabilities, but studying behavior patterns. When they attacked, they knew exactly how the Ravagers would react to every stimulus. "That's good tactical preparation." "No, sir, that's something else entirely." His voice carried an edge of something that might have been fear. Good tactical preparation would involve studying the enemy's capabilities. What the humans did was study the enemy's psychology. They didn't just plan to fight Ravagers, they planned to manipulate them. Consider this. In 2 centuries of military service, he had learned to analyze enemy capabilities, predict their tactical responses, and counter their strategic objectives. But he had never thought about studying an enemy's fundamental behavioral patterns to the point where you could predict and control their reactions. Show me the psychological profile they developed. Transferred the data to the main display. What appeared was not a standard military intelligence report, but something that looked more like a scientific study of animal behavior. The humans had cataloged everything from feeding patterns to social hierarchies to stress responses. According to this analysis, the humans identified 17 different behavioral triggers that would cause predictable responses in Ravager populations. The waste system overflow that created their initial distraction wasn't random. It was specifically designed to trigger cleanup instincts that would override territorial defense behaviors. And the Queen's assassination. They knew exactly how the guard population would react to her death. Not just that they would be angry or confused, but the precise neurochemical cascade that would render them temporarily incapable of organized thought. Stared at the data in growing amazement. They weaponized the enemy's own biology against them. It goes beyond that, sir. Look at this section. The display changed to show a detailed breakdown of human hunting techniques throughout their evolutionary history. Persistence hunting, pack coordination, tool usage, environmental manipulation, all refined over millions of years of pursuing prey that was faster, stronger, or more dangerous than individual humans. These aren't military tactics, said quietly. These are predatory instincts that have been systematically developed and refined for longer than our entire civilization has existed. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. Commander, incoming priority transmission from Council Command. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the imposing figure of High Admiral, the senior military commander for the entire council. His reptilian features were set in an expression of serious concentration. Commander, I've reviewed your mission reports. I need you to answer a question honestly. Of course, High Admiral. In your professional opinion, could your best warriors have accomplished what those 5 humans did? Was quiet for a long moment. His first instinct was to say yes, that military superiority was unquestionable, but the evidence was undeniable. No, sir. Our warriors are stronger, faster, and better armed than humans, but we don't think the way they think. Explain. We approach warfare as a contest between civilized opponents. Rules of engagement, tactical doctrine, strategic objectives. Everything is based on the assumption that we're fighting intelligent enemies who will respond to military pressure in predictable ways. His golden eyes narrowed, and humans. Humans approach warfare as if they're hunting prey. They don't care about fair fights or honorable tactics. They care about understanding their target completely and then killing it as efficiently as possible. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Results speak for themselves. Exchanged glances with before responding. High Admiral, I need to share something with you that's not in the official reports. Go ahead. After the mission, I had an informal conversation with Master Sergeant about human military history. I asked him about some of the conflicts mentioned in their databases. And, High Admiral, humans have never fought a war they didn't eventually win, not once in their recorded history. His expression remained unchanged, but could see the implications registering in his eyes. They fought wars against enemies with superior technology, superior numbers, and superior resources. It doesn't seem to matter. They adapt, they learn, and they win. How is that possible? Activated his personal tablet and brought up the human historical data he had been studying. Because they don't just fight wars, High Admiral, they hunt civilizations. The display showed a map of human territorial expansion over the past several thousand years. What began as small tribal territories had gradually expanded to encompass their entire planet, absorbing or eliminating every other intelligent species they encountered. Every other sentient species on Earth went extinct shortly after coming into contact with humans, not through disease or natural disaster, but through systematic displacement and elimination. Are you suggesting humans are inherently genocidal? No, sir. I'm suggesting they're inherently successful predators. They don't necessarily want to eliminate other species, but when resources become scarce or territories overlap, they consistently outcompete any opposition. Stepped forward. High Admiral, there's something else. We've been analyzing human settlement patterns since they joined the Council. Look at this. The display changed to show recent human colonization efforts in Council space. At first glance, it appeared random. Humans had established colonies in dozens of different sectors, many of them in areas that seemed to have little strategic or economic value. I don't see the pattern, admitted. It's not military expansion, explained. It's ecological expansion. Humans aren't conquering territory, they're filling ecological niches. The display zoomed in to show specific human colonies. Each was located in an area where the local environment or resource distribution created opportunities that other council species couldn't or wouldn't exploit. They're not competing with us directly, said. They're positioning themselves to become indispensable. Every human colony provides something that the local council species needs but can't produce efficiently themselves. Economic integration, mused. More than that, biological integration. They're making themselves part of the ecosystem of council space. In 50 years, removing humans would cause economic and social collapse across dozens of systems. The High Admiral was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications. Finally, he spoke. Are you recommending that the Council reconsider humanity's membership status? Had been dreading this question. High Admiral, I don't think it matters what we recommend. I think the choice was made the moment we encountered them. Meaning? Humans don't join civilizations, sir. They don't become members of existing power structures. They identify successful ecosystems and find ways to make themselves essential to those ecosystems. And once they're essential, the ecosystem belongs to them. His expression grew grim. Commander, you're describing a species that represents an existential threat to every other intelligent civilization in known space. Yes, sir, but I'm also describing our most valuable allies. Before the High Admiral could respond, another communication alert sounded. Priority transmission from human vessel persistence. Put it through. Captain appeared on the display, looking tired but satisfied. High Admiral, Commander, I wanted to personally thank you for your support during our joint operation. The thanks are ours, Captain replied. Your team's performance was extraordinary. We're pleased we could contribute to Council security. I also wanted to inform you that we've received approval from Earth Command to share some of our hunting techniques with interested Council military units. Felt his blood run cold. Hunting techniques. Advanced infiltration methods, behavioral analysis protocols, long-term observation strategies, the kind of skills that could be useful for dealing with future threats like the Ravagers. That's very generous, said carefully. We believe in cooperation between allies. In fact, Master Sergeant has volunteered to conduct training seminars for any Council species interested in learning these methods. The communication ended, leaving the three military commanders in uncomfortable silence. They're offering to teach us how to hunt, said quietly. Or they're ensuring that every major military force in Council space becomes dependent on human expertise, replied. His reptilian features were set in deep thought. There's a third possibility. Which is, they're ensuring that when the next existential threat appears in Council space, something worse than the Ravagers, every Council species will instinctively turn to humans for solutions. The implications of that statement settled over the bridge like a cold fog. If humans became the Council's primary military problem solvers, if every major threat required human intervention to resolve, then humanity would gradually become the dominant species in Council space, without ever firing a shot in anger against their allies. High Admiral said slowly, "What are your orders?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of decisions that would shape the future of galactic civilization. We accept their offer of training. We learn everything they're willing to teach us. And we hope to whatever gods we believe in that humans continue to see us as allies rather than competitors. And if they don't? The High Admiral's golden eyes grew cold. Then we pray that some other species develops better hunting techniques than they do, because if humans ever decide that the Galactic Council is something that needs to be eliminated. He paused, considering the data they had just reviewed. Based on their historical success rate, I would estimate our chances of survival at approximately 0. 3 months later, Master Sergeant stood before a mixed group of Council military officers in a training facility orbiting the representatives from 12 different species had come to learn human hunting techniques, though suspected most of them didn't fully understand what they were asking for. Today we're going to cover the fundamentals of predatory thinking, he announced. The first thing you need to understand is that hunting isn't about being stronger or faster than your prey. It's about being smarter. A crystalline collective officer raised one of her crystalline appendages. Master Sergeant, our species possesses computational abilities that far exceed human cognitive capacity. How can humans be considered smarter than more advanced civilizations? Smiled, and every human in the room recognized the expression as the same one he had worn before infiltrating the Ravager hive ship. Intelligence and wisdom are different things, officer. You can calculate faster than I can think, but I can predict your behavior better than you can predict mine. How is that possible? Gestured to the holographic display, which showed a simple maze with a piece of food at the center. If I put you in that maze, you'd use your computational abilities to calculate the most efficient route to the food. You'd reach it faster than any human could. The crystalline officer nodded agreement. But if I wanted to catch you, continued, I wouldn't try to beat you to the food. I'd study the maze until I understood every possible route you could take. Then I'd position myself at the point where you'd have to pass, regardless of which route you chose. That's simply tactical positioning. No, said quietly. That's predatory thinking. I don't need to be faster than you if I can predict where you're going to be. He activated another display showing the Ravager hive ship mission. We didn't infiltrate that ship because we were stronger than the Ravagers or because we had better technology. We infiltrated it because we understood their behavior better than they understood ours. An officer spoke up. Master Sergeant, are you saying that humans approach all conflicts as if you're hunting prey? Was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of thousands of years of human evolution. Officer, humans don't approach conflicts as if we're hunting prey. We approach conflicts as hunters because that's what we are. It's what we've always been. Everything else, the technology, the civilization, the diplomacy, those are just tools we've developed to become better at it. The training session continued for several more hours, covering techniques for behavioral analysis, environmental adaptation, and psychological manipulation that had been refined through millions of years of predatory evolution. By the end of the day, every council officer in the room understood why 5 humans had been able to accomplish what entire fleets could not. But they also understood something else, something that would keep many of them awake at night for weeks to come. They had just learned the fundamental principles of how humanity approached conflicts, and every single technique had taught them could just as easily be used against Council species as it had been used against the Ravagers. As the various officers filed out of the training facility, remained behind with Captain. How do you think they took it? She asked. Watched the alien officers through the viewport as they boarded their respective shuttles. About like we expected. They're grateful for the knowledge, but they're also starting to realize what it means. Any regrets about sharing this information? Shook his head. These techniques aren't secrets, Sarah. Anyone who studies human history can figure them out. Better that our allies learn them from us in a controlled environment than discover them the hard way during an actual crisis. And if some of them decide we're too dangerous to have as allies? His expression grew thoughtful. Then they'll try to eliminate us, and they'll discover that humans have been preparing for that possibility a lot longer than they realize. Captain followed his gaze to the departing shuttles. You think it will come to that? I think it depends on whether the Council can accept having humans as equal partners, or if they'll eventually decide we need to be controlled. And if they choose control, his face showed the hint of a smile that Captain had learned to recognize as extremely dangerous. Then they'll learn the difference between hunting Ravagers and hunting humans, and that's an education I suspect they'll find much more expensive than they're expecting. As the last council shuttle departed the training facility, began cleaning up the training materials. But he also activated a secure communication channel to Earth Command. "This is Hunter 1, he said quietly. "Training session complete. Recommend advancing to Phase 2 of the integration protocol." Acknowledged, Hunter 1. Are the Council species ready for deeper cooperation? Looked out at the vast expanse of space where the Council had built their interstellar civilization. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, millions of years of accumulated knowledge and culture. All of it would belong to humanity within a century, and most of them would never realize it was happening until it was too late to change course. "They're ready," he confirmed. "Begin expanding human advisory positions throughout Council military and government structures. Continue economic integration protocols, and prepare contingency plans for any species that proves uncooperative." "Understood. Anything else?" Smiled as he watched the last Council shuttle disappear into hyperspace. "Just remind Earth Command that patience is the hunter's greatest weapon. We've waited this long to find our place among the stars. We can wait a little longer to make sure it's permanent." The communication ended, leaving alone in the training facility with his thoughts and the vast beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, the representatives of 12 different alien civilizations were returning to there with new knowledge about human capabilities. Some would use that knowledge to become better allies. Some would use it to become more effective soldiers. And some would use it to realize that humanity represented a threat unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. All of which was proceeding exactly according to plan. Because the most important lesson hadn't shared with his alien students was the oldest rule of human hunting: always know more about your prey than your prey knows about you. And after 3 months of training Council military officers, humanity now knew a great deal indeed about the psychological profiles, tactical capabilities, and strategic limitations of every major species in galactic civilization. The hunt was entering its final phase. The only question remaining was whether the galaxy's other intelligent species would realize it in time to matter.